Welcome to Build. I'm Laura Haywood. Lerner Loewe's My Fair Lady has been called the greatest musical of all time. Originally produced in the 1950s, it's been revived and renewed for the current Broadway season in spectacular style at Lincoln Center's Vivian Beaumont Theater. In addition to her famous tutor, Henry Higgins, the legendary character Eliza Doolittle has two other important men in her life, and the actors who play them are here with me today. Jordan Donica plays Eliza's suitor, Freddy Eynsford-Hill, and playing her father, Alfred Doolittle, is the Tony-nominated Norbert Leo Butz. Gentlemen, welcome to Build.
Thank you. Thank you.
What a glorious production. Lincoln Center Theater has outdone itself, which is not something I thought I would be able to say after South Pacific and
King and I.
The King and I, right. I was going to say Anna and the King, and I was like, that's not right. But it's so glorious, and you guys are such an important part of it as Eliza's other leading men.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to the show for the second time last night to watch you both, and at first I thought, man, these characters are opposites, and then I thought, no, they're the same. I'd love to hear you each describe your character for people who maybe aren't familiar, and give us a couple of adjectives to describe how you see that person.
I play Alfred Doolittle, and Alfred Doolittle is Eliza's father. It's kind of an iconic role. He is an alcoholic. He is an absentee father. He is a bit of a con man. But what he really is, for the purposes of George Bernard Shaw, who, remember, based My Fair Lady on Pygmalion, his play, was he wanted to present a character. George Bernard Shaw was all about social reform. He was extremely critical of the treatment of women in the Victorian and the Edwardian era. Pygmalion was written around 1910, 1911. But he was writing from the late 1800s all the way through like the 1930s, so late Victorian Edwardian period. So there was this phrase called the undeserving poor, and basically in England they were a lot of failed policies on how to take care of this overwhelming population of working poor. And non-working poor. You've just had the Industrial Revolution. I will make a point with all of this. But you have this cheap labor force. You have this enormous labor force. It was a real social problem in England at the time. Of course, you've got this aristocracy, of which this character is a part of. So the government comes up with this phrase, the undeserving poor, basically what we would call welfare in the welfare state that we have, like in the States. And so Alfred Doolittle is someone who has a job as a garbage man. They called him a dustman, but sort of is ambivalent about going to work, spends most of his time in the pub. We know he has one daughter, probably illegitimately. There are probably other kids. He wanted to present like the worst type of person in the community, but he makes this guy sort of very witty, very charming. He knows he's kind of a ne'er-do-well, and he stakes his claim on that, saying, okay, I'm a part of this community. I know I'm good for nothing. I know I don't work, but I'm happy doing that. I ask nothing of the community, and all I want is to live my life as a poor man, doing nothing, spending my time drinking. And so the character is really a Shavian concept, if you will.
Shavian being the adjective of George Bernard Shaw.
Exactly,
yeah.
What we call Shavian, these ideas of the way he has characters kind of embody socio-political ideas. Well, Alfred P. Doolittle embodies this idea of the undeserving poor. And
Doolittle is not an accident as a name, in other words.
Yeah, Doolittle is his,
right.
is his name. So it's just this incredible part of this guy that the audience really starts to root for against their own better judgment. He's a terrible father, you know, he's just a real Rouse layabout. But Bart Sher, our director, urged me to think of him more as a counterculture figure. He urged me to look at sort of like the beat poets, you know, sort of like the Ken Keseys and the Neil Cassidys and the Timothy Learys, people who sort of in the 50s and 60s were kind of existing on the outskirts of society, and how they did that in order to make a statement about the society itself. So he's this kind of great counterculture, alcoholic philosopher, ne'er-do-well, and he's a blast to play. Anyway,
He's also an exceptional dancer.
He can be an
Very exceptional dancer.
Okay, Jordan, tell us about Freddy.
I play Freddy Eynsford-Hill, and he is, as Norbert said, a member of the aristocracy. That does not mean that he has money, which I find really interesting. He actually has no money. Their family, they were born into this massive wealth, and we could do a whole bunch of backstory work in terms of how they lost all of their money. But the fact of the matter is, one of my favorite parts in the script. In the script, it says when he hands the flower girl the coin for the flower on the street where you live. In the script, it says it's his last dime.
Oh, interesting.
At least in the script that I had when I auditioned. And so I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. This guy is of a high class, but has no money, and is willing to kind of give all of that up for this woman who he meets and who kind of shatters these ideas, much like her father, shatters these ideas of what class means. I think that's what draws Freddy to Eliza, is that she kind of has no other recourse than to just be herself, even when she's trying to be someone else. And I think that that's really inspiring for Freddy, and that's something that he's never seen in this high class where decorum is everything. How you carry yourself is everything. And I can relate to that in the sense that, I come from a place where, even today, there are people that we know who appear as though they have everything, but then they go home and they live in a house that has no furniture, So that's kind of my approach into who Freddy is. And I think it's really interesting, too, because we talked a lot in rehearsal about this is a coming of age for everyone. Freddy is, about 20, 21 years old. And the war is about a year away from happening. And so the stakes are kind of high for everyone involved. And so my approach into, he's not just some creepy dude who just falls in love on a whim. It's really that urgent need of he needs to see this woman, because any day he might have to go away. And he also has nothing else to do because he has no money. But he has nice clothes, and he appears as though, he and Doolittle kind of switch places at the end, because Doolittle ends up, spoiler alert, having all of this money, and Freddy never has a dime to his name. And so I think that's really interesting, and I think because of that, he's able to see beyond these elements of class that Higgins also says he doesn't believe in. Whether or not he does or not, that's a whole different story. But I think that's what draws him to Eliza, and why he loves her so much and is willing to give up everything, which is nothing really.
Well, but
for
as
her.
the show, in a scene that neither of you was actually in, Higgins talks about how a few pence for a beggar is the equivalent of many, many pounds to somebody else. So you giving away your last brass farthing is 100% of your income.
Exactly.
So it isn't nothing.
Exactly.
It's everything you have.
Yeah.
Your character is like a pauper amongst kings, and yours is a king amongst paupers.
Yeah.
And they also, my favorite thing that weaves your two characters together is that you may be the only two men in the show who see Eliza as a human being. Henry Higgins talks about, he basically treats her like a doll, like a prop. And Mrs. Higgins, his mother, says something about, oh, how adorable you babies are playing with your living doll. But what Freddy falls in love with is when she shows her true self, when the flower girl shows through the lady. And, Alfred doesn't, he's not that loving or kind to her, but he's also not expecting her to pretend she is anything she's not.
Exactly.
You guys spend very little time together on stage. You have one quick moment.
Yeah.
Do you watch each other's work when the other is on stage and you are off?
I do. I probably like at least 4 shows a week watch Get Me to the Church on Time.
Oh, well, that's an incredible number.
Right. And the first preview, I sat in the VOM and I watched the whole thing. And because, you don't, I'm going to brag about you for a second. It's not very often that you get to work with someone that you've idolized for so long. And so to watch them work and then to have the chance to step on stage and have a moment with them is, for me, very, very huge. And it's a huge learning lesson because in the script, we don't have that moment, really. Bart was really good about, he's like, I actually want to bring it all on stage and have you witness this interaction between her and her father so that can propel you forward. And so it's really, and that, what I love too is that moment kind of is always shifting in terms of what the mood is and how we're feeling day to day, because again, you're seeing these 2 levels of, the king amongst paupers and the pauper amongst kings meeting and kind of rubbing, 2 ships passing in the night. And in the middle is Eliza.
Right.
And I think, and it's so cool to be able to work with you and watch you do your thing. And I remember saying, "Oh my God, he's so good." And I was like, and you can tell that you love what you do, which is so inspiring too. And it's cool.
But wait, before I want to hear what you have to say, but first I want to find out where you were, how old you were, and like what you first saw Norbert do, and like when you were first, what you were.
This is like making me feel like I'm like 75.
No.
I mean, your body of work, Norbert, is so ridiculous. I was trying to think off the top of my head all the things that I've seen you in, and I couldn't keep count. And then I went and looked at your resume, and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot he was in that, and he was in that, and he was in that, and he was in that. You're one of only 9 people to ever win 2 Tonys as leading actor in a musical. Whether it was, Catch Me If You Can, whether it was Fiyero, whether it was Rent, whether it's...
I'm telling you, I'm old. It's not, I'm really I'm getting up there. I'm 51 now. The resume gets better. No.
Do you know how many people have the amount of credits you have at 51? Not very many. Yeah. So let us pretend you're getting a Lifetime Achievement Award or something,
really?
And just gush about where we were and when and how we first realized your genius.
I want to say for me it was, I was doing The Wizard of Oz right when Wicked came out, but I didn't.
Who are you playing?
I was a Munchkin.
Shut up!
He's 6 feet 6. I don't know if you guys have seen this.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
I love that. That's actually a really funny choice for a Munchkin.
Yeah.
Have them all be like NBA players, you know.
But you know what? I wasn't a soldier. The soldiers were always, I was like, how am I not a soldier? And I'm one of the tallest, anyway. But, and I remember everyone was obsessed with Wicked, and I hadn't heard it or listened to it or anything. And it was actually a couple years later, it was the last 5 years that I listened to. Oh. And I fell in love. I was like, oh my gosh. And then I eventually saw Wicked and listened to it and then, and everything else, Big Fish, that's one of my favorite books. We talked about it. I asked him about what that experience was like. And, but for me, it was the last 5 years listening to that album with you and Sherry Renee Scott. I was just...
Let's keep talking about him like he's here. Did you know, like he's not here. Did you know that he's also an incredible actor who's, when not doing musicals?
Yes. The TV, Bloodline? Is that the show you're on?
Bloodline, and on stage, How I Learned to Drive, and Dead Accounts. I didn't just do my homework. I saw all of those shows. I'm like a legit fan. It's not research. It's just like my life. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about your impressions of Jordan.
Well, I did not know.
How old were you when you first realized when you first saw his work?
Like I'm one of the senior members, like I said, of My Fair Lady. Well, this guy, I didn't know Jordan's work. I had never heard.
Because he's fresh out of school.
I know, he's like 14.
Although he has been in Phantom.
But he
and
came
Hamilton
in, so we were all kind of
already.
like, who is this extremely tall, impossibly good looking? And then he walks in, and I remember the first time we did a run through of Act 1, and he sang his it's the greatest melody in the show, On the Street Where You Live. It's a very, it emerged as kind of the hit single of My Fair Lady. It's this stunning song. And I remember he sang it in the rehearsal room for the first day. And like, all of the guys were like, damn, damn. And he sings like that. And the girls all kind of got a little weak-kneed. It was kind of a moment. It was like an event in the room. And Bart knew that he had the voice, but none of us just knew. And Bart was just like, wait. And so I don't watch his performance, but I listen to the show every night, and every single night listen to what he does vocally. He sings his butt off, and it's extraordinary technique as a singer. It's just beautiful. I was thinking about this. There are odd roles, and I have found My Fair Lady to be deceptively difficult to do. I think I'm on stage about 20 minutes all night long, and I thought, at 50 years old, I'm gonna sit back and kind of coast through a show, and it's been very, very difficult. And I'm wondering if you're having the same experience, in that both of our characters have really big moments that we need to nail each night. I have a really big scene and monologue at the halfway through Act 1, and then I have an hour and 50 minutes off stage, and then come back on, do a kind of dark scene, and then this big show-stopping dance number, right? And you and I are in similar boats. Yeah. You've got kind of your one thing that you really have to hit, as opposed to most productions when you're playing the lead roles are kind of easier. You kind of get on a train, and that narrative kind of takes you along. In these roles, you got to kind of come in. You have a very specific thing to add to the narrative, and you got to nail it. Yeah. And this is his only song. He cannot go out there and not kind of knock on the street where you live out of the park. I can't come out and kind of half-ass get me to the church on time. This is the reason that these characters are there. And so I find the time off stage to be a real challenge.
Oh, interesting.
It's the hardest part of the evening. You do your first bit, and then, like I said, I have an hour and 45 minutes, and it feels like my body's gone cold again. I have to re-warm up. I keep injuring myself and losing my voice. It's almost like I wish I could sort of get out of costume and then go to the Y and do a full workout and then come back and then get on stage. Yeah. And Jordan, I just want to say, has a really interesting way of spending his time off stage. He just hangs out in his underwear. He just and does not care. It's just underwear.
It's my underwear and my undershirt. Because
boxers or briefs.
Boxer briefs.
It's a boxer brief. I'm always astonished. I'm like, put some clothes on. You're so unselfconscious about it.
Well, I mean, wouldn't you be?
Well, no.
I would be probably naked just all day.
No, because
I would never put clothes on.
Because one time, I remember being in one show, and I would hang out in my costume. I think it might have been South Pacific or something out in Utah or something. But, you put your costume on, and then you sit, and you go do the thing, and then you come back and you sit. And I remember being yelled at because my dresser was like, "Your clothes are going to get wrinkled.
Yes.
Take them off. You can't just sit in them." And I was like, okay. So I come on. It's really interesting because, like Norbert said, it's hard in the sense that we come on, and then we go away for an hour, and then we have to track in our mind where we've been while the show happens.
We know where Freddy's been. He's just on that street the whole time.
Right.
So I'm finding that you can't just sort of binge a Netflix show or get deep into a novel. Yeah. I'm a guitar player, so I've got my guitar. So you've got to do something, but you can't get too into something so that it takes you out of the play. Yeah. It's a very strange thing. What it makes me wonder
is whether there's ever been a version of My Fair Lady where this was a double cast, where one actor played both of these characters.
Well, that would be extremely talented.
I do know that my university just did a 12 or 10 person production of the show last summer or something, where everyone doubled. So if you played Freddy, you were also a costermonger perhaps, or things like that.
I have a friend who played Eliza in a really wonderful production up in Ithaca with it was 2 pianos, and I want to say same thing, 8 actors. My Fair Lady is to the musical theater what Hamlet or As You Like It or Twelfth Night is to Shakespeare is a masterpiece of writing, which means it can sustain many interpretations. It can take on incredibly different design concepts. The material is that good. it's all there.
Yeah.
So you can do it with 8 actors. You can do it with a piano, and you can do it with what we're doing with 40 actors and a 38-piece orchestra. Or whatever.
Oh,
And like a full
incredible.
mansion built inside.
Yeah.
Like,
It's-
I want to move into Higgins's.
Yeah.
The writing is that good.
It's like I feel like we're like doing a mini movie because the space is also so intimate as well.
It's somehow intimate and like
And
massive
large.
at the same
It's
time.
I think they said it's the 4th largest stage in New York. It's the
Wow.
largest Broadway stage.
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, it's just so cool, and it feels like a playground. You know, it's what you dream about doing as a kid in your living room, pretending to be a Power Ranger. So like, you know, it's awesome.
I feel like there's a story there.
Yeah.
Which color Power Ranger?
I was the Green Ranger, who then Tommy, who became then the White Ranger. Kind of a rogue.
This was just in your imagination?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what did you dream about being when you were a kid?
I was into some of the Marvels too, but I was really into tennis when I was little. So like I wanted to be like Andre Agassi was like a first, you know. And actually the hair, I'm kind of getting it here. Like you know, like his bad hair period. You know, remember? I think I'm kind of rocking that.
He wore a lot of like hair, like
Extension,
wigs, a lot
yeah,
of
it was a
wigs.
whole thing going
Yeah.
on. I'm not there yet, but yeah, I wanted to be a professional tennis player or soccer player, so it was more athletes.
This actually, this is another thing you guys sort of have in common and opposite. You have grown out all your hair for this, and you took all of yours off.
Oh,
gone.
that's right.
It's
You
gone.
had that
It was
massive.
Yeah.
Like,
Everyone's like, I forget you had so much hair when we started this.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
because you were playing Lafayette and
Yeah.
Jefferson and
That's right.
Hamilton
Yeah,
on tour,
I was out in California,
which
the
I got to
last
see,
year.
and it was brilliant.
What are the odds of that? Yeah, it was a really great time.
Susan gets around.
And that was, yeah.
The odds are pretty good.
I love it.
like
I love
because
it.
I just got, like that. First of all, that's my hometown.
Oh, amazing.
So and also I knew some of the cast, and
Yeah.
but I go to the theater so often that chances are if you were in it, I saw it.
Yeah, and it's been such a. I feel very blessed in my very short time here to have had a very diverse career, and I only hope the same for every actor. Because you know Hamilton is the same length as My Fair Lady, but everyone is on stage the entire time, singing everything, dancing, and doing everything, and so it's exhausting.
Yeah.
And so then to go from that to this, where you think, oh, I can just coast through this, no problem, and then you find the challenges of the piece. You're like, oh, no, because I remember after a couple previews, I was like, I feel like I'm just getting warmed up by the time I'm done. You know, because in most other shows, when you're playing a lead, you have, like, Les Mis is a perfect example for Valjean. The whole first 10 minutes is a great vocal warm-up because you start in the middle, you go down, you go up a little high, you go down, you go back to the middle, and then you're wailing at the end of it. It's just really brilliantly built. But when you're playing a character who comes on, says the second line, and then goes away for an hour and 15 minutes, and then comes back and sings this huge number, and then goes away for another 40 minutes and comes back and sings the same thing, and then goes away, you have to find the things that keep you sane because you're suddenly going from having no time to all the time in the world, and you still have to do the job really well. So it's cool.
Speaking of time, we have to wrap up. I feel like I could easily talk to you guys for hours. I do want to make time for a couple of questions from the audience, though.
Hey, hi guys. My name is Danny. Pleasure to be here. I'm just wondering, if you're not comfortable with this is fine. But I'm wondering if you would be open to speaking a couple of character lines from the show. If not, I have another question, but...
Do you feel like there's a
if you're
line that you
comfortable with
say that is sort of like encapsulates your character, or like an iconic Alfred or Freddy line?
I'm hesitant to sort of like do with it, but there is one moment that I have found in the second act that I'm sort of thrilled with. Remember, this is a musical based on this genius play by George Bernard Shaw called Pygmalion. So the text that we're saying in the play is straight from the play. This is, next to Shakespeare, people consider the greatest writer who ever lived. So these are really good words we get to say. It's difficult because it's in a thick Cockney accent. And my Cockney I'm still working on it. I like to say my Cockney accent it's as if I had spent my summers in Paducah, Kentucky. Do you know what I mean? And then like went back to London for the school year. It kind of goes in and out.
Henry Higgins would be able to identify this very thing.
I come into all this money through this kind of comical way, right? This guy who loves just being a bar rat, and that's all he ever aspires to be, comes into all this money, gets a windfall. And he's so upset about it. And it's comical and it's funny. But I found this thing the other night where I got really, really angry and depressed about it. And it says, I say to Eliza, I say, I was happy, I was free. A year ago, I had no relation in the world. In other words, no one wanted to have anything to do with me. I had no relation in the world except for one or two who wouldn't speak to me. But now I'm 50 and not a decent week's wages amongst the lot of them. And then I say, oh, don't you see, I have to live for others now, not for myself. And it's this idea, again, of Shaw, who was this really progressive guy who was all about the individuation of the human spirit as opposed to systems and governments and things sort of keeping them down. And I thought, oh, right, for a guy who prides himself on his autonomy, now he has to be a part of this kind of moneyed class. It's like a grief. It's like a kind of a death that he has to now behave and act in ways that are socially acceptable. And so I just loved that. Don't you see, I have to live for others now, not for myself. We're supposed to be living for others, right? That's what morality says we do. But for this guy, it says, no, I'm a king unto myself. I'm my own master, and that's gone from me now. And I found that very, very moving. So that's the thing about this text, man. It's really, really rich. You can find, there's new stuff to be found in it all the time. So anyway.
Yeah.
Really? Really? I got an applause for that?
Oh, yeah. So I don't say much. I
sings.
I sing.
All of his feelings. Come on.
And I think what I really found interesting about the piece is the only father figure we have represented is Alfred Doolittle. You only see my mother and you only see Mrs. Higgins. There's no talk about fathers. There's no male influence. And I was raised by a single mother. So then I think the respect and reverency that Freddy has for females and women, as opposed to, as juxtaposed against Higgins, is very interesting. And so what I love most is the line, people stop and stare, they don't bother me. Because everyone, the thing that we've kind of decided is that everyone knows that the Eynsford-Hills don't have money, but they accept them into the aristocracy because they are a part of that. It's all about the image of it. But this guy is just hanging around, walking up and down this street, talking to himself basically, and seeing things in a way he's never seen them before. And he's floating on cloud nine, and he recognizes that people think he shouldn't be there and think he doesn't belong there. But he doesn't really care because he loves this woman.
He's in love.
He's in love. Yeah, so that's, people stop and stare, they don't bother me, for there's nowhere else I'd rather be.
That's one of my favorite rhymes in the piece.
Yeah.
Well, that's the amazing thing about Alan J. Lerner. He rhymes in dialect. And that's incredible if you think about it.
Yeah.
We have time for one more.
Hi. How much does the costume inform your character, and how comfortable are the costumes on this show compared to other shows that you've done?
First of all, I love your shirt.
Thanks.
For me, shoes and costume are always like the final piece, because what you wear informs how you hold yourself and how you walk and how you stand. The costumes are brilliant. They're really comfortable. What I love, too, is, I don't know about yours, but mine were kind of made period appropriate. So, like, with materials that you probably would have seen from that era. And the suit that I wear in the second act is like a blue wool suit. It's gorgeous. For today's suit standards, you probably wouldn't wear it, but for the suit standards of, late Edwardian England, it was the top of the top. And so they're really gorgeous. They're beautiful. And they add to the decorum of the piece. You know, like you stand up straight, you walk straight. Whereas opposed to, you know, when I was doing Hamilton, I got to wear this nice long purple satin jacket, and you're like, and you put it on, and you're like, oh, now I know what this character is.
Swagger.
So, yeah, exactly. So like to me, putting on the hat and the gloves and the shoes and the vests in particular help you to find the final pieces of the physicality of your character, because it's hard to imagine what all that feels like. So yeah.
I kind of do it the opposite. It's I start with the costume designer before I even go into rehearsals for something. I start and I try to get mock-ups of everything that she's going to have me wear. Start right away, because I don't have any imagination. I never know where to start when rehearsals start. So I just start by getting pieces, and you starting to use my imagination. And we're blessed, as Jordan said, with Kathy Zuber, who is one of the great clothing designers, costume designers, geniuses in the world. Mm-hmm. She's amazing, and yeah, it's not so much about comfort, it's just about the specificity that she thinks of for each character. I mean, I could tell you like all kinds of little secrets about my costume. She's just extraordinary.
Yeah, that's so true, because it's very much like, I remember going into the fittings and her asking what I, as Freddy, would have preferred. Like, oh, what do you think of how this looks? Like how this feels on your body? And it was I was like, oh yeah, like, because usually I try to find shoes to wear in rehearsal. And that's the closest that I get to imagining what the character walks like. But she was very. It was the first time that costume, what I was going to wear, felt like a very collaborative part of building the character, which is why she's so brilliant.
Not to mention the fact that she has to design them so that you can dance like a freaking genius. I want to learn the little bit of luck dance. It's like all in the shoulders, and it's so much fun to watch.
I honestly don't even know what I'm doing up there. I've always just been like an instinctual mover. I get a few steps, and then I have no dance training.
He does the splits in Act 2.
He does.
I mean, this is not an amateur we're talking about here.
I love dance. It's my favorite of all the art forms. If I could be anything in this business, I would be a dancer. Like that's how much I love it. My dad was a dancer when he was a kid, and he trained, and then he moved on to football in high school. But I have 7 brothers. I'm one of 11 children, and my dad tried to get us all in dance, and none of my brothers would go. We were always too, I don't know, vain or, you know, mass butch or whatever, afraid, and I regret it so much. My dad's gone now, but he told me for years, you can sing, you can act, you need dance training, shut up. And he was so right, because I wish now that I had like a real technique that I could, do you know what I mean?
You are doing pretty well for yourself.
He is.
I enjoy it, but I just have so much respect for the form. I mean, yeah.
Well, you are both at the top of your game, as far as I can tell, and showing no signs of slowing down. Lincoln Center Theater's production of My Fair Lady is absolutely gorgeous. You are 2 of the highlights. I'm thrilled that I got to get to know you a little bit today, and dig into some of the characters who maybe not in the spotlight the most time, but just have some of the most beautiful moments in this entire legendary show. Everyone go see My Fair Lady.
Yeah.
Thanks, gentlemen.